So I'm going to assume that she's starting that. This is so weird, isn't it? That we're just sort of talking into a screen and people are out there somewhere. My name is Matt Youngbauer. I'm the library associate at the Centennial Library, and I have been here for 7 or 8 years. I don't even know if we count time this year. You know, that was like 5 years just in March. So I've been here for a while. And my primary focus is youth services. So infants, toddlers, kids, school-age kids, teens. I like to say I work for the children and the kids at heart. So that's my primary focus. But I'm also the guy who comes out and fixes the copier and bangs on the computer until things work. We're a small community branch, so everyone kind of does everything around here. So today, thank you for inviting me. I thought I would give you kind of a brief library tour, at least tell you about some of the different sections of the books that are of interest to you and probably of interest to your kids as they're kind of growing up over the next couple of years, and just sort of give you some examples. We'll talk a little bit about early literacy story times. They're right now being done virtually. So there's recordings that the library's been putting up back since June. They're still putting them up. I think they're about to take a break here kind of for December, but then they'll pick them up again in January and just talk about why our story times might be a little bit different from other story times. And then share some favorite books. And certainly I always like questions. I love questions actually. So any questions you want to send to Sarah or put them in the chat, I will try to get to them as best as I can. I'm used to being derailed. I have 2 teenagers, so I'm plenty prepared to go off topic and kind of cover whatever you guys want to cover. I'm just here for you today. So that being said, let me take you on a brief sort of tour of the library. As you come in, you're going to go to the children's area. That's pretty easy to find generally. That's the loud area, or it used to be the loud area. And we'll talk about some of the different areas of books. And I'm going to kind of hold stuff up. I know this isn't the ideal and it might be flipped, but I think hopefully you'll get the idea. So we're going to start with books for the very small. Those are board books. They're all very low and they're in little baskets. And so I like to joke that these are books to get chewed on. So sometimes we have parents come in and they're very apologetic and they're like, my child ate this book or my dog chewed this book. And I'm always like, don't worry, we'll take care of it, because that's what the books are for. They're for putting in kids' hands and having them figure out, like, how do I open this thing? How do I close this thing? There are words in them, and certainly, like, as the kids come a little bit older, you can kind of go through. This happens to be a Halloween pumpkin one, if I hold it up like that. But they're really just for getting comfortable and familiar with books. So these are lots of fun, and we have a lot of them, and you know, you can grab as many as you want and just kind of let your child go to town or sit with them, read with them, read them to them, have them babble them, as they're probably quite young when they're looking at these. All right, so board books, very fun. I always like, there are some bigger size board books, but I like these. This one is even a little bit big. I like the ones that a kid can hold. Like, having it in their hands is so important. And they feel ownership of that too. So this happens to be a rookie reader, which is a good label, but I like this kind of size here. All right. So then we have picture books, and I think everyone kind of knows what those are. I'm going to grab this one, which we're going to use a little bit later. So those are in bins, and they're organized by author's last name. So if you're looking for a certain one, you can certainly ask us to help you find them, or look in the catalog. We do have a couple seasonal bins, so like right now it's filled with books about winter and things like that, Christmas, Thanksgiving, and that, but most of them are just by author. Okay? And I wanted to touch briefly as well about some nonfiction sections. Now, especially if your child is very young, there might not be a huge draw, but once they get a little bit older and they want to start learning about like dinosaurs and space and princesses and castles and trains, lots and lots of trains in my kids' background, then there's an easy nonfiction section. So I pulled out a couple examples. This one is Full of Fall, and it's a poetry book. Now, the poetry is very simple. Most of it is just lots of, I don't know how that looks on camera. Most of this is just pictures of sort of fall things with words that are kind of pretty and might be a little bit new to your child. So this is the fun nonfiction book, and a little harder to find because it's a nonfiction. It's not organized by author. It is organized by subject matter, which is organized, in our library's case, by Dewey Decimal, which just sounds like a bunch of gibberish and a bunch of numbers. So Some people are very good about finding topics, but we're also there to help you find certain things. So this is over there. And then I pulled out another example. This is Water Can Be by Laura Purdy Solis. And it's all the things that water could be. So in this case, let's see, water could be an otter feeder. So there's a picture of an otter taking a drink. A downhill speeder. So there's like a waterfall coming on. I just flipped through one more page. A garden soaker. So there you see water coming out of a sprinkler. And a valley cloaker. So there you see mist in a valley. So that's kind of a fun thing for kids to think about. There's one about a rock, one about a stick, and it's just all those things that water and rocks and sticks can be. So nonfiction, although generally a little bit older kids, so not small one that we just saw, but it's there, and there's a lot of fun things in there. They get a little bit buried, but they're worth digging out. Okay. So when your child is closer to school age, which some of you might have older siblings or kids coming up, we have easy readers. And I just grabbed one. This is Dig Dogs Dig, a construction tale. And in our library, they're all in one spot. They have this very bright yellow sticker on them that says reader, easy to spot. And a lot of them, but not all of them, have numbers on them. There's the number 1. And we often have parents and adults and caregivers coming in and asking, especially once their kids hit like preschool, kindergarten, like, where do I find, the level 1s and the level 2s and level 3s? And unfortunately, there's not a great answer. I mean, they're all in easy readers, but every publisher does it a little bit different. So someone's number 1 might mean one thing in one publishing group, might mean a completely different thing in another publishing group, some organized by letters. So that's confusing too. So unfortunately, they're organized by author because that makes it easiest for most people to find certain books, and not by number. But you can, as you flip through, kind of find ones that might fit, a suggested reading level, and then just kind of flip through and make sure that that's what your kid is interested in. So if you have any other questions when you come to the library about reading levels and such like that, we're happy to talk to you about those. Like I said, those are kind of more preschool, kindergarten. Once they get a little bit older, they kind of graduate into those. And then if they're starting to read a little bit better, and I'm just going to briefly talk about these are what most people call chapter books. So I grabbed Magic Treehouse, which is a pretty popular series, even though it's been around for quite some time. I grabbed Rainbow Fairies. There we have Angelica, the Angel Fairy, which is still popular. There's a lot of these. And then Miss Marty Loves a Party, which is another chapter book through 2. So it's very hard to see. I mean, there's obviously a fair amount of words on the page here, but this is sort of reading things together at home maybe, or reading, if you've got a very strong reader, they might be able to pick into these, once they get into kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, even a little bit older. So these are the early readers, or the chapter books. And then beyond that, which I think is a little more advanced, we have middle grade fiction, and then we go into all the other sections in the library. So that's kind of an overview of the children's area. We also have books on CD there, so those are good for for long road trips when people are taking long road trips, or for listening at night. So those are kind of fun because sometimes parents will pair the book, the audio book, with the print book, and then kids can kind of follow along, learn to read, or work on, at least pretend to read and build some confidence. So those are good things. And that's kind of the children's area. I know I tend to talk kind of fast, especially when I can't hear anyone. So hopefully this is all kind of sinking in, and this is good. If anyone has any questions, you can pop them probably in chat, or maybe raise your hand and Sarah can help me figure this out. Otherwise, I'm going to kind of go and talk about what we do during story time, if that's all right. And I'm just going to...
Things are sounding good. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, that sounds good. So we call it an early literacy story time that we do in the library. And if you have ever seen either myself or one of the other librarians, either in person, that's sweet to hear, either in person or virtually, you'll see a lot of different styles. Some are very high, very high energy. Some are a little more low key. Some of us use more puppets, some of us use more songs, some of us play a lot of music, some of us play no music, but you'll see a lot of consistent things, and we tend to point these out, and these are consistent across the county, and it's that we focus on the 5 early literacy skills. So sing, talk, read, write, and play. And I'm just going to go over them very, very quickly, and then I'll kind of dive in a little bit deeper and talk about why they're kind of important in learning. So reading is kind of the obvious one. I mean, we read books, we read stories to the kids and encourage you to read it at home as well. Singing, as you may hear from my voice, it sounds, I know, very low in a recording. I like to joke that I have kind of a Johnny Cash range, but if I'm willing to sing in public to people, then you should as well. And because it's really important for a child to hear you singing. You're the child's first musician, which is kind of an awesome responsibility. And singing is a really good way for them to learn, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Writing, in story time, we don't tend to write. Sometimes there'll be a craft, or we'll hand out color sheets afterwards of the live story times. But we do a lot of finger plays that encourage sort of those basic writing skills. So holding a pencil, holding a crayon, or a marker or something like that, that's hard work for a young person. That's something that the muscles have to build up to. You have to get comfortable. You have to develop the fine motor skills to do that. And so doing a lot of finger plays, whether it's itsy bitsy spider, or holding up different fingers, or sort of clapping, those all contribute to those fine motor skills and getting ready to do a lot of writing and drawing and scribbling. I often joke that hopefully they're drawing on paper and not on the walls, which they did at my house when they were about that age. But those are all really important things. So we also have talking. I love going into kindergartens because my story time is I show up with a couple books that maybe we'll cover. I show up with a couple songs that maybe we'll do, and then I just show up because the kids have so much to tell me by that age. I'm new, I'm fresh meat, and they want to just talk. And talking is really important. They're narrating their lives. They're developing some narrative skills. They're sounding out those new words that they may have just learned. So talking is a big component of early literacy story times, and then playing, just having fun, making the library a fun environment, making learning a fun environment, making reading a fun environment. Okay. So those are kind of the 5 skills. That's a very broad overview. So I just want to dig deep into a few of them and offer a couple sort of suggestions and things. And I'm going to talk with singing. And I mentioned that it's an important one, and that it's important for you to sing to your child. If you think about the alphabet song, that's one of the first songs that we ever learn, right? And we can still, if you needed to get to the 14th letter of the alphabet, a lot of us would still go, we would count through. It's how we learn, breaking songs, putting language into song form is a way to learn. It's an easy way to remember it. You think about earworms, getting one of those 80s songs stuck in your head you can't get rid of. It's one of the best ways to learn is to put it in song. So there's a great website called Jbrary, and it's Jbrary, so library, but J right in front of it. And it was 2 young women, 2 Canadian librarians who went through and did a lot of songs, early literacy songs, a lot of the classic childhood songs, and sang them and kind of showed you what they were supposed to sound like. And they've kind of shifted focus more recently into doing other things, but for a couple of years, they probably have 200 songs on YouTube, and it's a really easy way to learn a new song if you're running out of material, or you feel like you want to share something fun or something that you can't quite remember the words. That is usually my first stop if I'm trying to find a new song or remember an old one. So it's Jbrary. It's really great. They're not sitting there with synthesizers and a drum kit. It's basically just them singing the song, kind of like we would if we were singing to children. So that's a really great place to look for new material. The other thing is there are books that feature songs prominently. And some of them are better than others. I saw that we have a Bob Dylan one, which I think would maybe not be quite so accessible to a child. One of my favorites is Waking Up is Hard to Do. And it's actually set to the tune by Neil Sedaka, which was Breaking Up is Hard to Do, from the 60s. So, and it's even got at the very end, the kids all get to go down, doobie doo, down, down. So like I said, I have a Johnny Cash range, so I will not be doing this, but this is a fun one to share because the pictures are bright, the song is fun, it's really accessible for kids, and you know, waking up some days is hard to do. So that's a good message for you too. So that's a very good suggestion. That's a fun one. And there's a lot of other ones. I've seen a couple of John Denver songs turned into books and things like What a Wonderful World has been turned into a book. So take a look and just see what you have. If you've got a favorite, especially older musician, that might be something to look into. All right, let's see. Reading. So we read during story time, but then we encourage kids to read everything. So like I'll take out my ukulele case and I'll point to that it says Mr. Matt, like these things are not just scribbles, that actually says something. We'll point to name tags, learning to read the child's name, like that's the most important word in their entire world. So allowing them to read it or finding excuses for them to read it is fun. Or going out, when we used to go out more to grocery stores, that was always a suggestion, is helping them learn to read, you know, the milk signs, the coffee, very important to learn how to read coffee, and sort of those sorts of things. But still, there's a lot of reading material at home, I'm sure. It could be the label off of something, or words on a magazine or a book or something like that, a package coming from Amazon. We're all going to learn to read Amazon real well here, I think, in the next couple of weeks. So reading whatever they can, and just getting interested in it. Writing we talked about, so practicing finger plays. The other thing is, I think a lot of parents are, and I was the same way, think like you need to know like 400 songs and 400 finger plays, and you really don't. Because if you learn a few basic ones and then those become favorites, like the kid develops confidence, the children develop confidence about doing the same thing. And so it might be very repetitious to you, but not so much for the child. So, and you can do a couple of variations. So one of the simplest one, which is always like I say it's my floor filler, like the big one that everyone gets crazy on, is the Itsy Bitsy Spider. And so we talk about, we're gonna sing the Itsy Bitsy Spider, which is often one kids know or are learning. And we do it the traditional way, but we do it very quiet, right? And then we do it a second time, and except of making the spider like this, we make it a medium spider, and we just sort of clap. And that's hard for, you know, that hand-eye coordination is hard for some of us. But it's a fun way to change the song. And then we get down on the floor and we stomp or we bang on our knees, and we do the big humongous spider, right? So same song, you're just changing a couple words, but humongous is a vocabulary word, so that's a fun word for them to do. And it gets their whole body involved, so not only do we practice fine motor skills, but we work up to, like, you know, large body motor skills as well, all in just one song. And we haven't really changed anything other than a couple words. So now we have 2 songs. So a simple suggestion is to take those songs that you already know or already do and just tweak them a little bit, or just feel more comfortable and, you know, really own those songs because they're fun. They're fun. Playing is probably my forte. You know, my wife jokes that she's still waiting for me to grow up. So I love playing, but I think it serves an important purpose in a story time as well. So not only does it make it fun, like ultimately that's what we want. We want them to enjoy this process. Not, you know, the library is a fun place, but it also, like, it gets our imagination going. So reading is not something we are born knowing how to do. It's something we have to learn. And I like to make the analogy that, like, if you kind of learn that this stick is actually, you know, a bridge, you can imagine the stick is a bridge, or lightsabers, I probably would have pretended, or a pen, or something like that. If you can pretend that, then making the jump that pretending these squiggles on a page actually represent a sound, and putting those sounds together represents a word, and those words represent objects in the real world, like that doesn't seem like quite so much of a stretch. So the more you can develop your imagination and kind of play and pretend things, I think the easier it's going to be to start putting some of those more advanced skills together. That's kind of my soapbox. Plus, I love playing too, so so that's fun. So we talked. I've got my notes here, so I'm kind of going. So singing, talking, reading, writing, and playing. And I think that's kind of what I covered. Sarah, was there anything, any questions out there that we're seeing here?
I don't know. Does anyone have any questions for Matt or any other ideas of things that they can be doing at home with their kids, or any questions about the library or services that they provide? Oh, yes. Jean is asking in the chat box, how can we get more Mr. Matt time? Yes, that's a great question.
That is a good question. So we are still in virtual performance space. Yeah, I miss story time too. Like many other people, I sort of have been relearning to do my job in the virtual world. So we are not going to start in live story times for some time that I know of, but there'll be more virtual ones. I think I'm hopefully going to record a couple in December as part of that. You can watch the Anoka County Libraries Facebook page for that schedule. Hopefully I'll be able to do that because Rocky and I would love to kind of come out of our shelter here for a little bit. So with that in mind, I thought I'd talk a little bit about just some of my favorite books, if that's okay, and if people have other questions or if I think of something else I want to say, we can do that as we kind of roll through this here. So let's see, what do I want to talk about? I have this whole, yes, I have this whole list of things. Oh my goodness, there's a lot. Now this I should have never opened my mouth because now there's a whole bunch of questions. Let me talk about a little bit.
I can help you with the questions too, Matt, if you want to start answering some, then I can always read the rest off to you.
So let me start with a couple favorite books, and then I'll jump back and we'll try to go back to some of those questions because I don't want to miss any of those. And I'm going to start. Let's see if we can find an earlier one because I know most of them are a little bit younger. Ooh. All right, so I'll do like half of my list, and then I'll jump back and get to some of the questions. So there's a whole series by Christy Matheson, Tap the Magic Tree. There's Touch the Brightest Star. There's a bunch of them. And when they first came out, I was kind of skeptical because it seemed a little bit too much like an iPad app. But now I kind of like them. And as we're getting more virtual too. So there's Matt. So I'm just going to read the first page so you can get a sense of what it is. And if you can't see it, I'll narrate it so we'll get there. There is magic in this bare brown tree. Tap it once and turn the page to see. And so that's what this book does, is it encourages a kid to kind of interact with the page. So that we're talking about fine motor skills and writing, and that's a good thing. Like, how do we do this? So you tap once and then something happens. And it might be hard to see, but the leaf showed up, and you tap it again a bunch of times and more leaves show up. So these sort of interactive books, this is just one example. She's done probably the most, but there's a few more that are starting to come to market, are a really good way. And especially if you have, I know one of the questions was sort of like, how do you get interested in it? And this is a little more kinetic. Like it gets involved a little bit more. There's actions that you have to do in this book specifically. There's a part where you have to sort of jump up and down and shake all the leaves, and then you turn and see what happens. So that's one. Jan Thomas, this would be a little bit older. Jan Thomas writes a number of these books. Rhyming Dust Bunnies is one, which I actually think I have here. Is Everybody Ready for Fun is one. The pictures are bright and silly. There's not a lot of words, which means you can kind of point out text, especially as you're getting a little bit older. There's a lot of, again, actions. This one says wiggle to and fro, to and fro, to and fro. Let's all wiggle to and fro on chicken sofa. So not only is there an action, but it's very silly, which is what I like. I tend to specialize in silly. And Jan Thomas has written a bunch of them. Rhyming Dust Bunnies, Can You Make a Scary Face, and The Big Mean Dust Bunny. All of them, which especially like toddler to preschool, are super, super fun. If I can't find a book, like a new book, I'll just pull one of these off the shelves and go with it because I know it's going to work. I do this one mostly because Dr. Seuss is really hard. Like Dr. Seuss is great, and in children's literature, sort of the Shakespeare of children's books, but they're really hard to read. This is the easiest one I've ever found. It's My Many Colored Days, and it's very sweet. If you've been in Story Times, you know I read this one a lot. And there's a lot of animal pictures in this. And so I have read this sometimes we'll just read it straight through because everyone wants to just listen to the book. And sometimes we just talk about the animals and we do all the animal actions, and that becomes the entire reading of the book. So there's a brown bear that's like kind of growly and low. There's bees that buzz and make good bee sounds. There's an owl that's really quiet. So we have to be very quiet when we get to the owl page. So it's a very dynamic book. Like there's a lot of shifting things that you can do with this book beyond just read the book. So that's why of all the Dr. Seuss ones, this is by far my favorite. And the other ones are great, especially like the tongue twisters and the words, which are really fun. Kids seem to love watching adults fail to read all the words on a Dr. Seuss book. But this is one that's fun to read. And then let's see, we'll do two more and then we'll jump back to questions. So these are really, the story's not the most exciting in these, but they're fun. They're really popular. So he's got My Bike, there's My Car, My House. These are Byron Barton's books. Even his name, it makes it, I think he could only write children's books, and they're really colorful. Oh, all right, I think I came back. Sarah, my screen went black there for a second, so hopefully that worked.
You're back.
Okay, all right, excellent. So My Car, so those are really fun. And then I'll wrap up and then we'll do some questions. Kevin Hankis writes a number of books, and librarians and teachers all love him because he writes a seasonal set. So if you need a book for winter, he's got one. If you need one for spring, he's got one. Winter is here, which I'm not going to read to you because we all know we can look outside and just see that that's what's happening. This is a good day, and it's the same kind of thing. Like the words on the page are very, very big, easy to point out. Sometimes they're the only thing on the page. There's a little bit of a narrative, right? There's Fox, but the pictures are really cool. The words pop on the page because they're not with the pictures. It's got a nice message. And at the very end, we get to say, "Mama, what a good day," which is a nice message for kids. So Kevin Hankis, some of them are a little bit more advanced, but this series and the winter ones are super, super fun. Right? I could seriously just go on, but let me jump back and I'll try to just look through the chat here real quick and then see what we had. Let's see. So so recommendations when a child loses interest in a book. So sometimes there's a couple different answers, I guess. I mean, there's no one answer, right? There's no one answer. So sometimes we just put that book down. So in Storytime, we have started a book that I thought for sure was going to this was going to be the greatest thing ever, and they're not into it. Usually that means we need to move more. Like we're just in a rambunctious day and we need to move more. So then we'll do more music, we'll do more movement, we'll do more finger plays, anything to kind of get us moving. And sometimes it's just a poor fit for the audience. Like I thought they would be super into this, and it just turns out they're not. So switching, not being afraid to just be like, you know what, let's do something else, I think is part of it. And then the other thing is trying to make the story a little bit more dynamic. So like I said, Many Colored Days, depending on how how you're approaching it. Let me see if I get my camera back. Is like you can either read the whole thing, or we can just go through and be like, what's happening on this page? Like what are we doing on this page? Like what kind of animal is that? So emphasizing more the talking aspect and the that sort of aspect of the book. We can talk about color in this case. We can talk about the noise. We can talk about whether we think this animal is loud or soft, and sort of focus on other different skills. So that's not feeling like you have to read every single word on a page and not feeling like you have to like get through the whole thing, I think is part of it. Or at least that's tended to work, at least for me. And let me pop back. So the hockey, there was a question about hockey. Off the top of my head, I know there's a Minnesota, I think there's a Minnesota hockey book. But if you send me or just call the library and ask for me or pop in, we can look more at hockey books, because there are a number of like picture books that are geared towards that kind of thing. And even as they get older into kindergarten and school age, there's a bunch of authors who sort of reliably turn out like sports books, which is really cool. When I was a kid, it was Matt Christopher, but there's other people who've sort of taken on that mantle, and they've written a wide variety of sports books. So some baseball and football, but also like kind of tennis and track, and I haven't seen a curling one, but I wouldn't be surprised. We're in Minnesota, so you never know. So the hockey part, I would just check with me. As for ukulele, so someone asked about ukulele, like what's the easiest way for a kid to learn ukulele? Because I play ukulele. And there's a couple things. So first, I'm assuming they already have a ukulele, but if they don't, there is a ukulele kit that you can get from the Anoka County Library. So we have a couple of different activity kits. One has a telescope, there's a loom, and there's a ukulele. So you can certainly get that one, which comes with a book and some suggestions and things like that. So it's not just the instrument, it comes with some other things too. So that's one way to get access to that. And the other thing is just to like go online. There's a number of ukulele teachers who post lessons, especially right now, when everything is kind of online. And you really don't like to play a lot of the songs, especially childhood or like kid songs. And weirdly enough, punk songs, like you only need 3 chords, right? So if you can learn kind of a C chord and maybe a G chord and an F chord, you've got a pretty good range. Like that'll cover most kid music, and a lot of punk songs too. So anything you need to jump around in, you are golden with that kind of stuff. So if you need specific ukulele stuff, you can always send a letter to me. But really, just learning a few chords and seeing some of the resources that are out there are probably the best way. And then there was one more, and it's okay. So I'm gonna babble at this part, because the one more question was, how do you teach? What's the best way to teach a child to read? And I don't think there's I don't have a great answer. So as a parent, I can say personally, my wife is in education, and I'm a librarian. So my kids just we got lucky. They're great kids too, and super smart, but they were just surrounded by books. And we said they just had no choice. Like they were gonna have to just learn to love books. But I think making it fun, the more fun and engaging and allowing the child to sort of choose the direction that they want to go in is really important. Giving them a little bit more control, and realizing that they may not want to read the same things that you wanted to read at their age. They might be super into stuff that you're like, oh, that's junk, or I'm not talking about inappropriate, but I'm talking about like, that's not really the greatest thing, but in my opinion, it's just my opinion, but they're reading and they're engaged and they're having fun. So one of my friends whose son is now a young adult, especially in middle school, he just kind of didn't want to read anything, but he was interested in sports. And so she got a Sports Illustrated subscription, and he devoured that. And because that's what he was interested in. He wanted to read about, football players and basketball players. And, you know, I think it's easy to dismiss that kind of thing, but like that's what got him hooked. And then he got interested in those players and he was like, oh, I want to read a book about the player. And that came into like, oh, this player mentioned this thing, and now I want to learn more about that. So allowing kids to kind of follow their interests, I think is key. Making it fun is certainly part of it. And then just like some days, you know, some days I don't feel like reading. Like some days I just want to take a nap too, and just allowing them some of those freedoms. And again, I know that's not the best answer, but I think, you know, just having fun with it will go a long way. All right. I'll just pop through here and see if there's other questions here. And I wanted to talk just real briefly about some more advanced books too, because, you know, as kids grow up, they're going to obviously move away from board books, chewing on board books. And I thought we just kind of, I'd end this part and then I'm happy to stay on for a little bit, just talking about some more advanced books and then see where that kind of goes. So with that in mind, so these are all still picture books, and we'll just do, we'll do a couple. So this is more like a kindergarten book. It's still a picture book, still in the same section. This is Harry the Dirty Dog. But as you flip through, and it's an older one, like there is definitely a story. Like this is what happens next. What happened, you know, then Harry gets dirty, like there's consequences, there's stuff happening in the background pictures. There's other things, you know, I'm not going to spoil, I don't want to spoil the end like, of Harry the Dirty Dog. But there's definitely a story going on here, as opposed to like some of the other ones, which were like, look out the window, there's snowflakes falling. You know, this is much more of a story, probably more for like kindergarten. I actually think that kids should still read picture books into school age. They tend to not do that, but I think they should. But definitely some, like a more advanced book. One that like is probably appropriate for toddler preschool, but is super fun, is anything by Mo Willems. So I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but if you don't know Mo Willems, these are the funnest books ever. Pigeon is one of his characters, so this is in the picture book. And Pigeon is like super easy to kind of draw, and he's very simple pictures. The story, there's usually a temper tantrum, so the words get really, really big, which is fun to kind of yell together with the kids. Mo Willems' stuff is all great, but it's more story oriented. And he also has some early readers, so some of those books that we were talking about at the beginning when they're starting to kind of read for themselves, featuring Elephant and Piggy, which are also great. Really, anything he does is superb, but the Pigeon books and Elephant and Piggy in particular, especially like preschool, kindergarten, kind of that's the golden age for these things. Let's see, where's, and then I was going to end. I'll just do two, because I could just like clearly could just keep going and going and going. So I always tell people, like, if there's a book that you remember from when you were a kid, like you probably have a lot of love for that thing, and that will sell the book. So Goodnight Moon still works, and you know, I do it for a slightly older audience when I read this one, and sometimes we act stuff out, or I'll pull out like a cow puppet as we talk about like what animals are coming out. But this book still has some legs in it, so don't neglect like classics that you remember, you know, from when you were a kid. This is a pretty good one and it still works because it's simple and accessible and very, very universal. On the other end, and I'll just finish up this part with this. I got a whole stack of stuff. Is a more modern classic is B.J. Novak's The Book with No Pictures. So again, this is more older kid, like preschool, kindergarten, because it's all words and it's all about how you read it. Because there are no pictures in this book; it's just all you reading to them. But it is super, super, super fun because the adult reading it has to say really, really silly things. I have taken this into classrooms, so young, like elementary classrooms, and a lot of times I'll hear, "I know this one, but all that really means is, please read this to me again because you're going to sound silly, and I will make fun of you, and it'll be the best 5 minutes all day." So, so we go from the very sentimental and sweet to the very silly. But this is, if you don't know this book, especially when the kids are a little bit older, this one is a lot of fun. So that's B.J. Novak from The Office, The Book with No Pictures. All right. So like I said, I can put my email up in the chat quick, but it's very easy. It's just my name, Matt.Youngbauer, Youngbauer, and then it's a long county thing, so it's at co.anoka.mn.us, but Sarah could probably send it around too if you have any questions. Like I said, this has been a strange time for us too, so getting out and kind of talking about early literacy and picture books and reading, I would love to do more of that. So I'll pop it in there real quick, and then Sarah or Diane, if anyone has any more questions, I'd be happy to.
Thanks, Matt. Does anyone have any other questions or any other comments? Or Diane, I know, is on, who's one of our parent educators here at Centennial, and I don't know if she has any tidbits to share about reading or things they've talked about in class, but anything else?
I have a question. Can we somehow videotape your online story time to show in classes?
So it's on, they're on Facebook right now, so I don't know how easy that is, but we could probably work out. I know there was some talk about doing one like monthly. We could probably get that going. We kind of had like lots of places. We had some staffing issues as we were trying to figure out all the virtual stuff and trying to keep everyone, to keep the building safe and things like that. But that's something we could probably start doing easier now.
I was thinking, Sarah, for our young readers.
Yeah, yes, I know. And for those of you on the call that are listening in, if you do have young kiddos at home that are between the ages of 0 to 5, we do have a young readers class going on right now, and we have some other online ECFE classes that we do that you'd be welcome to join if you aren't already involved. And would love to have Matt come out and do either like a virtual session with the kids, or maybe we can pull up those Facebook videos in our classes to show the families. We just know that everyone loves when you come in, Matt. And so if there's any way that we can partner and do that and have a way for the families to see you, even if it's virtual, I think that would be really great. So Diane, maybe you and I can connect about that after the call here.
Sure. Matt, I was just going to piggyback on what you were talking about in terms of making it fun. Mm-hmm. And somewhere along the lines, I had learned that things that are really boring, like flashcards, and I can't think of anything else, but can you comment maybe a little bit more on things maybe to stay away from, because in your experience, you know that they're not fun, if that makes sense?
Nothing specific comes to mind. I think part of it is just over time doing this, I've kind of a pretty good filter about what books might work a little bit better for what ages. So anything that, because especially for younger, like birth to 5 especially, but even older, like anything that's going to involve me sitting and reading a lot of text is going to get, like, I'm going to get antsy doing that if we're not moving. So that's what I tend to avoid. Anything that's super abstract, I tend to avoid. Like I was sort of joking about the Bob Dylan picture book, but it's nothing against Bob Dylan fans, but the words are too abstract for kids to follow. I think there's one. I think there's a Forever Young one, which is everyone loves that song. It's very sweet, but like those kids don't follow what's going on. Then you're reading it more for you than for them. I think those are things I tend to avoid. Yeah, that's a good question. I have to think about anything else that I would really steer away from.
Yeah, I was going to jump in and just say another thing that I think about as well with just getting kids excited about things like if it's more of like an assignment or something where they, like Dan, you mentioned, like flashcards, or doing something where they have to read and kind of do a lot of more school related work than maybe just reading for fun. One suggestion might be to get them to do some hands-on activities with that, kind of like Matt was saying, movement, but also if they can like help create a flashcard, or maybe if they are, taking a break to draw a picture about what they're reading, or if they can maybe make their own book and write down kind of the basic parts of the book that they need to remember, or something that gets them creating. I know for myself growing up, I was more of a kind of creative, artsy learner. And so I really liked having more of a hands-on, like if I could create it, it helped me learn better. And so that might be something helpful for some families, for kids that need more of that active kind of hands-on artsy approach to it. So, but yes, definitely love the suggestions, Matt, of also moving and getting active, because it can be a lot just to sit and read after so long, especially if you're not super into the book.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, over time too, like the books that we did a few times and like I couldn't get them to work, then we just moved on. There's so many books, you know, to try. There's a whole library full of them. So
I know that a lot of parents have used the children's librarian for suggestions on, like maybe they have an upcoming doctor appointment and they have to get a vaccination, or they have to go to the dentist, or they're, you know, like the No David stuff, behavior things. And I think kids love to read books about what they're currently going through.
yeah, and I just saw, we've just noticed this last year, there's a whole bunch of DC hero, like comic book heroes who are like, what was it? It was like Superman is polite and Wonder Woman is kind. And like each one, I mean, they're very simple books, but if you've already got a kid, or maybe that like older siblings who are into those superheroes or comic books, or at least they know who they are, like that's one way to kind of sneak in some like kind of more like learning stuff, you know, issue-based things. There's a number of sort of fun ones. I mean, the Berenstain Bears for years and years and years kind of had the market on that, but there are other things more recently that might be, you know, more relatable to kids now. I think there's one, it was like Batman is kind. We're all like, it's not really maybe Batman, but.
Thanks for these great questions, everybody. I know we only have a few minutes left here. If there's any other questions or comments or anything else, feel free to speak up or type it into the chat box. But Matt, it sounds like things are kind of plugging along virtually at the library. I think I probably know the answer to this, but any updates on your end as to when more in-person things might be starting up in the library, or is that just kind of waiting to see what happens with the state and how things are going?
Yeah, I mean, we've been open since June. We do have sort of a capacity, but we've not come close, especially without programming. So we're usually not that full. So you're welcome to come on in. If you're uncomfortable, we do have a kind of a case-by-case basis for curbside. Or sometimes, you know, if your little one, especially with your little one, it might be like, that's just not the best day to come on in. You realize when you get there, like we can run stuff out to you if you call when you get there, or call ahead and we can check it out and bring it out to you. As far as like either closing or opening more, we haven't heard anything. I think, and again, don't quote me on this. I think unless the state locks down again, we probably are going to stay open. But in terms of opening up more, I don't know. I don't have any idea when that would happen. I would get, you know, later winter, I would guess would be the earliest, but it could be after that.
Sounds good. That's what I figured.
Yeah, we do have some limited hours too. So we're not open for our branch is not open Fridays. We're Mondays and Wednesdays we're sort of open later in the day, sort of 1 to 7, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays we're open earlier, so 10 to 4. So, you know, check the schedule to, you know, because we're not doing things the way we used to, so our hours are a little bit funky right now. And we're open Saturdays, so that's good.
Sounds good. Thank you. Yeah, we're all just kind of hanging in there. So yeah, thank you for joining us online. And I know this is very different for the parents joining us as well. We would much prefer to be in person, but we really are excited to be able to offer this series online and are so glad, Matt, that you could join us for the kickoff here. So unless there's any other questions, I think we'll wrap up here. Feel free to speak up now or put any questions in the chat box. But thank you again, Matt, for taking time today to chat with us. And it sounds like everyone really does miss having you in person. It looks like Elizabeth maybe has a question here. I saw her raise her hand in Google Meet. Elizabeth, did you have a question?
Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how this whole thing works. I just wanted to say thank you so much for doing this. I missed the first half of it, but I plan on going back and watching it. I really appreciate this. The online format is great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's very helpful feedback.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. Like I said, this is the part of my job I miss the most, is seeing people and seeing families and seeing the kiddos. So this has been great. So take care, everyone. Stay safe.
Yes, thank you as well, Matt. Yes, to all of you families, we hope to see you at the next Parent Speaker Series presentation. But thank you again, Matt, for joining us. And you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye-bye.